Hi. Long time no see. Welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing a December book haul, or what I would like to call birthday book haul, even though my birthday is in January. I did some damage in December and I've decided that it's my birthday book haul, so it's okay. It's totally justified because my birthday's coming up and there were a lot of good sales and I like to support independent publishers. And I like to support authors, so it's all justified. Anyways, I decided to do this book haul because I bought an obscene amount. Well, not all of them I bought. I was also gifted some by Nora. And I was just like, damn, I have a lot of books. So let me just do a book haul. So I just want to say that a lot of the books that I purchase, or a lot of the books that I like to read, they're pretty expensive. A lot of academic books or like nonfiction books are very pricey. And also like with independent publishers, like, you're paying full price instead of like getting it discounted on Amazon, which I do not support. I do not buy from Amazon. But also a lot of these publishers had sales and discounts, so I wanted to support them, but also the prices were reasonable. Okay, so I guess I'll start. I'm more professional now. I decided to take notes because I feel like I need to be more structured and more professional. So, let me start with the first book I hauled in December, which is this book, Liberalism, A Counter History by Domenico Lacerdo. And this is published by Verso, a publisher I love. The author argues that from its outset in 18th century, liberalism, the ideology, has been bound up in illiberal policies such as slavery, colonialism, genocide, racism, and snobbery. So I thought that was very interesting because I read a book called White Freedom by Tyler Stovall where he talks about liberalism, something I've never really read about. And I didn't really know what it was because we call people like liberals or whatever, and I didn't really know what that means. I didn't really know what liberalism was, and so I got like a better idea in White Freedom. But I think I wanted to learn a little bit more, and I liked how this book brings, like, as it says on its title, a counter history to liberalism, and how from its beginnings it's kind of wrapped up in this messiness of slavery and genocide, and you can't separate the two from each other. So we kind of get this really whitewashed, rosy picture of liberalism, whereas this is providing a counter history to that. So that I found really interesting. I actually bought this for Nora, but then I became greedy and gave it to myself because I was interested in it and I felt like I deserved it more. Okay, so on to the next haul. These are all 5 of these books were purchased by Nora. We do this thing called book extravaganza every year. We buy each other books and it's so fun. We like gift wrap it and we'll put little like blurbs or quotes of the book on the cover, and neither of us know which book the other one got. And it's kind of fun because we can either, we can get what the other one likes exactly, or we can challenge that other person by being like, oh, I think this is something that you would be interested in. You haven't looked into it yet, but I think you'd be interested in this subject. So yeah, this is all from that book extravaganza. So like I said, Nora purchased all these books for me, and they all look very interesting, and I am very excited to read each one of them. So the first one we have is Cigarettes Incorporated: An Intimate History of Corporate Imperialism by Nan Enstad. So this is interesting. It follows the rise of the cigarette, and it looks at corporate imperialism, multinational corporations, and yeah, capitalism too. It's just very. It's kind of Nora really likes to buy me kind of commodity focused books. For instance, she bought me a book about rubber, the empire of rubber. She bought me a book on cotton. And so she bought me a book on cigarettes. And yeah, this whole book kind of covers the entire kind of supply chain of the cigarette, and it really exposes kind of corporate imperialism. What did it look like? How does it look like? And that's something I'm very interested in: corporations, imperialism. So this looks very interesting. I'm excited to read it. The next book that Nora got me is called Stop Thief: The Commons, Enclosures, and Resistance by Peter, I think it's Linebaugh. This is actually an author I own one of his books. It's called The London Hanged, and he's somebody that's very interesting to me, like how he writes about, enclosure. Enclosure is something that I'm very interested in, just like and you can clearly see this book talks about it, is this idea of like there are these, commons, these places, like natural places like water, land, that are open to everyone. Everyone can access it. And then enclosure is this like closing off these lands and these waters from access. Essentially, kind of, I don't know. I don't know if I'm saying wrong, but like privatizing it. Like, so one land owner owns all this land, and now no longer people can publicly access that land. So that's something that's really interesting to me. Ever since I read The Origin of Capitalism by Ellen Makesons Wood. I don't know if I'm saying her name right. She talks about enclosure and the commons, and so I became more interested in it. And he talks a lot about it. I believe he's I don't know if he's like a Marxist. Yeah. Anyways, this book is a set of essays, so that's interesting. It's not like a typical book, it's more a set of essays about the commons, enclosures, and resistance. So just like, the commons, public space, like I said, enclosure, the closing of that public space, and resistance to those enclosures. So that is very intriguing. This is right up my alley. The next book Nora got me is The Mushroom at the End of the World by on the possibility of life in capitalist ruins by, oh goodness, Anna Lowenhaupt Singh. This was an interesting book. When she gave it to me, I was like, mushrooms. I don't really care about mushrooms. I'm not really like super into like understanding. I don't want to say nature, but like if something's about like wildlife, it's not my particular interest. So when I saw this, I was like, mushrooms. I don't want to read about mushrooms. But as I read the summary, it was very fascinating. Um, and Pankaj Mishra blurbed it, so I was like, I trust him. So this is a book about a particular mushroom called the matsutake, which is apparently the most valuable mushroom in the world. And just following its journey from the forest to the plate, to like the plate, And through this mushroom, we can understand, um, what is it? Let's see what I wrote. Yeah, through this mushroom, we can understand the relationship between humans and the natural environment. Um, yeah, I think it's more in depth than how I explained it. Like, there's a lot more there. Um, but I just want to kind of explain it in the most briefest way. But I do think it has a lot more to say, about like capitalism and, um, I think, what's it called? Biodiversity. It says here the mushroom at the end of the world delves into the relationship between capitalist destruction and collaborative survival within multi-species landscapes, the prerequisite for continuing life on Earth. So that sounds very interesting. That sounds very up my alley. I've read a little bit about, um, like how capitalism and colonialism kind of shaped our natural environment into this like I think it's like monoculture where we kind of have like one set of trees or, um, like cash crops where you grow one set of crops. And a lot of people talk about how biodiversity is very important. It's like more natural, kind of many different species living together, which is honestly a parable for humanity about how we are most productive when we are the most diverse, and that's how we thrive. Um, and you, by seeing how humans like, um, break down that multi-species biodiversity and turn it into like monoculture, and terraforming, those are things I'm very interested in, and I think this kind of touches on that. So I would be very interested in to understanding more about that, and more about nature. I am still interested in nature. I like nature through kind of like a colonial capitalist lens. So this is very interesting. The next book is The Garden Against Time in Search of a Common Paradise by Olivia Lang. This book is like everywhere. I believe this book came out this year in 2024, and, I've seen it on a lot of lists. I never saw it before until Nora got it for me, and then now I see it everywhere. Um, yeah, so this is actually a very interesting book because the author was going through the process of restoring her garden, and she lives in England. Um, and that made her interested in like gardens and like what she calls paradise on earth. Um, and like who can access these paradise and who cannot. And she looks into in this book, the history of gardens and, its ugly sides, um, who it excludes, who it privileges. But she also looks at gardens and how they are these spaces for people to come together, these forms of spaces of resistance. So that's very fascinating. I never perceived the gardens in that way. And this also kind of connects a lot to Stop Thief with enclosures and, the mushroom at the end of the world about like biodiversity, and nature. So there's a lot of nature and capitalism and colonialism and all these things and how they intertwine, and I'm excited to learn more and more about it. I never thought I would read these types of books or this type of angle, but I'm like every time I read it, I'm more and more intrigued. It really started with, the Nutmeg's Curse by Amitav Ghosh. That book is so good, and it really opened my eyes to like terraforming and all these things, like how we shape Earth to kind of just extract from it. Um, so yeah, it's something I'm interested in. Uh, so Nora got me spot on. And the last book that Nora got me was, or is, Lone Woman by Victor Lavelle. This is, I think, a horror book. It's actually something I've like seen around, been interested in, um, been not interested in. I was back and forth, but she bought it for me, not knowing I was actually kind of interested in it. So that's funny. She knows me that well. I believe this book is about just a woman who becomes a homesteader, and she has a lot of secrets. I think I'll just read this blurb, honestly. It says, darkly magical, suspenseful, and deeply compelling. Expect richness, surprise, and beauty. Now, I'm really interested in horror. Um, I think this is horror. I don't know. I think this is horror. I think it's horror. But I'm interested in horror, and I used to read mystery thrillers a lot, like your typical mystery thrillers, but I became just I just wasn't liking them, or they had a lot of problematic tropes that I disagreed with. And so I just didn't like reading those genres anymore. But I've been recently finding little books in that genre that to me add more to the conversation of the genre. Like when you bring up race, I like books that bring up race with horror. I like books that bring up um, capitalism, like colonialism, immigration, grief, just like more, it has more substance to it. Like, I'm not saying that those books don't have substance. I don't want to throw shade, but a lot of the general mystery thrillers to me seem quite problematic. Uh, Yeah, and so I like to have books that have a different lens, a more a lens that I think they have just so much. It's just so much more interesting to me. So I think Lone Woman is one of those books where I'm like, oh yeah, this is interesting to me. I like this angle. So I'm excited to read this. So that is the books that Nora bought me. The next books that I purchased were from the publisher Pluto Press, which I love. So I got a few books from there because they had a sale and I couldn't help it. I think it was like 60% off. So I was like, dang, I have to participate. So the first book I purchased from Pluto Press is They Will Beat the Memory Out of Us, Forcing Nonviolence on Forgetful Movements by Peter Gelderloos. Gelderloos. Basically, okay, so I'm just going to read the back because it kind of says it in a really brief way. It says, Gelderloos shows how nonviolent protest is a symptom of social amnesia and inability to remember what we have learned from our past. Cautioning against future waves of pacification and forgetting, he urges us to collectivize memory and develop the methods we need to fight for our survival. So, this is a book that I've been seeing around and I've been fascinated by, especially right now, in our time right now. Um, I am very interested in violence. Like, what is it? Who defines it? Um, what violence is justified? What isn't justified? Like state violence versus non-state violence. And how oftentimes nonviolence or pacifism is pushed onto more marginalized groups who revolt or protest. Uh, this is very interesting, specifically around anti colonial movements, which have been more violent. I will say, I don't know, and perceived as in the West specifically as bad. And this uplifting of like MLK and Gandhi and these nonviolent movements. So I'm very interested in this kind of subject in this discussion. So I feel like this book would be very interesting to read about kind of how nonviolent movements. I don't know if he says doesn't work, but it just he's critical of it, and I am interested in understanding like criticism of nonviolent movements. So yeah, that's that book. You probably think I'm crazy because I read crazy books, but I like this stuff. The next book I got was Mussolini's Children: Fascism in Contemporary Italy by David Broder. This is basically about fascism in modern Italy. Yeah, delves into Italy's post-fascist movements rooted in historical fascism, but which claim to have transcended it. So that's very interesting. He talks. I believe he talks about how kind of the fascism of Mussolini kind of reinvented itself, and he looks at Giorgio Meloni's, I think, the Brothers of Italy party, which is a fascist party. Yeah, so that's very interesting to me. I'm very interested in fascism in Italy. One, because I watched this movie called The Catholic School, which was very disturbing but very powerful. I believe about fascism in the 70s in Italy, which was very virulent time for fascism. And My Brilliant Friend, the show, there's a lot of fascism in that show. So those two things made me very interested in wanting to understand Italian fascism. So that's the book I got. The next book I got is Settler Colonialism: An Introduction by Cy Englert. Engler. This is an introduction on settler colonialism. That's the best way to put it. Settler colonialism is, I'm ashamed to say it, but I really didn't know much about settler colonialism. Like, this is really sad, but I didn't know the difference between colonialism and settler colonialism until recently. And I read The End of the Myth by Greg Grandin, and also What's Happening in Palestine, and using the language, calling it settler colonialism. Now I have an interest in reading about settler colonialism, understanding it a little bit more, a little bit better, and what is an excellent starting point, but an introduction to settler colonialism. So yeah. The next book I got, this one I'm really excited for, is The Patriot's Dilemma: White Abolitionism and Black Banishment in the Founding of the United States of America by Timothy Mesner Cruz. So this is interesting because it looks at abolitionism and how kind of abolitionism has been framed. Yeah, this book looks at how we frame the motivations of white abolitionism. Inaccurately. And he basically says that the framers of the US Constitution were primarily concerned with the protection and betterment of the white community, not the liberation of enslaved black people. So that's very interesting to me because I've been reading a lot about slavery this year, and I'm very interested in abolition, how abolition came about, why it came about, why was there a shift away from slavery, which was a very profitable institution, very embedded in America and, in the economic system, the Atlantic slave trade of the West. How did it all of a sudden become like abolished? Like, why did it become abolished? What was the reason? What did that look like? I touched on it a little bit in Capitalism and Slavery by Eric Williams, which is a book I read this year and I really like. But I've heard a lot of criticisms around the way he frames abolition in that book. And so I want to read more about it. I want to understand more about it. So I got this book by Timothy Messner Cruz. So that's exciting. I'm very interested in that. Yeah. So that is it for the Pluto Press books. Now we move on to, I got one Verso book from Verso Online. So there are Verso books in here like I showed you, but this book I bought from Verso. It's called Traces of History by Patrick Wolf, Elementary Structures of Race. I came across this book when I read Tolerance is a Wasteland this year by Sari McDeasy. And I was very interested in what he had to say. So I was like, I need this book. In this book, he essentially, we say like, oh, racism is a construct. Racism is a construct. And this book is like, well, what does that actually mean? Like, what does racism as a construct mean? And I'm like, well, yeah, what does that mean? I want to know. So it kind of really gets into like race and racism. Yeah. Traces of history will change how we talk about the social construction of race. So that's very fascinating to me. I'm very interested in talking about race and understanding race and racism as a construct or as a concept. So that would be interesting. Apparently this man is like apparently Patrick Wolf is like really seminal when it comes to settler colonialism studies. So I think maybe in the future I will get his settler colonialism book and read about that. So yeah, that's what I got. The next book I got, this is not from Verso. This is from a local bookstore, shipped it to me because the author is coming to talk here, and you get, when you buy a ticket, you get a book. So I got sent the book. The Message by Ta-Nehisi Coates. That's who I'm gonna see, Ta-Nehisi Coates. So that's exciting. Yeah. So I feel like this book is everywhere. He's doing, his book tour. That obviously that's why I'm gonna see him. He's in his book tour era. And yeah, I think honestly I wasn't gonna read this book, but because I got it, I'm like, okay, I'll read it, and I'll read it before I see him, because it talks on Palestine, but I had other books I wanted to read on Palestine I was more interested in, but he has something to say about Palestine. He essentially, it covers three different areas. The first part, I believe, he goes to Senegal, and then he goes to South Carolina, I believe, and then the last stop is Palestine, but the West Bank specifically, not Gaza. You can't go to Gaza. And he actually went with PalFest while everything was going on. So yeah, that's the message. I am interested. I don't really know a lot about it, but I've seen a lot of his interviews, so I am very interested. So that's that. The last book haul I got is from 1804 Books. They they're like a online. Oh, actually, they're a physical bookstore. They have an online bookstore, but they're a physical bookstore in New York, and they're in the People's Forum. I want to go one day. I've never been, but they always have topics and books that are really interesting to me, and they had a really good sale, so I was like, I have to buy some books. So I bought a few. So basically, let me start off by saying I tend to get author fixations where I'm like, I have to read all the books from this author. Or maybe not all of them, but like a couple. It comes out of nowhere. It's just like, I have to have this author's books. I did it with like Mike Davis. I've done it with like Hannah Arendt. I've done it with other authors. And I'm just like, I did it with this one author and I haven't read any of his books, but I see him popping up a lot. I've heard of him and I'm interested. So that author is Gerald Horne. I got 3 books from this author. I have never read him yet. But the first book I got is The Dawning of the Apocalypse, The Roots of Slavery, White Supremacy, Settler Colonialism, and Capitalism in the Long 16th Century. Yeah, I think for this one, I'll just read a blurb about what this book is about. I think I'm going to read Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. Seeking the origins of the ideology of white supremacy, this book presents an original narrative that challenges the myths of United States exceptionalism. So yeah. I've been reading a lot about slavery recently, so I'm very interested and I want to learn more, as I've said previously. So I thought this was a good point to jump from because he gets into, well, I can show you the other book. This one, he covers the 16th century. And then in his next book, he covers the 17th century. The Apocalypse of Settler Colonialism, The Roots of Slavery, White Supremacy, and Capitalism in 17th Century North America and the Caribbean. So yeah, and this one is a fresh interpretation of the 17th century, his careful attention to European militarism, technology, national and imperial political dynamics disrupt the now common Anglo-North American story of the emergence of whiteness, racial slavery, and class consolidation. So yeah, these are, I just think, a good starting point for delving in more. I've read already Slavery in Capitalism and Slavery by Eric Williams, which is, very important work. And White Freedom also covers slavery, which is something I read this year. So I want to read a lot more. And I feel like Gerald Horne would be a good author to start with. I got another one by Gerald Horne. And it's called Confronting Black Jacobins. The United States, the Haitian Revolution, and the Origins of the Dominican Republic. Now, I have C.L.R. James's book, The Black Jacobins, and I haven't read that yet. I plan on reading it next year. I will read it next year. I will read it in 2025. I will. Manifesting that, no. But apparently he extends off from that book in this book. And I am also very interested in the Haitian Revolution. I want to learn more about it. So that's another topic I'm interested in. But it is all connected to slavery. So yeah, that is interesting. That's enough Gerald Horne, okay? Enough. The next book I got is How We Get Free by Kayanga Yamada Taylor, Black Feminism in the Combahee River Collective. Yeah, so this is about a group of radical black feminists called the Combahee River Collective. And it's an organization that developed out of the anti-racist and women's liberation movements in the 60s and the 70s. And Kianga interviews, this is like edited by Kianga, and this is a bunch of interviews with members of the organization, reflecting on the legacy of the contribution of the organization and the impact on today's struggle. So this is interesting. I love Kianga. I love Kianga's book, Race for Profit. So I was like, I have to get Kianga's other book. I have to. And I saw Kianga talking with Nora Arakat and Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I was like, love Kianga. So the last one, I know it's outrageous, but the last one I got from 1804 Books is Capital and Imperialism, Theory, History, and the Present by Utsa Patnik and Prabhat Patnik. This one is about, what is it about? Mainstream economists presume that capitalism is a self-contained and self-generating system. Nothing could be further from the truth. In this path-breaking book, radical political economists Utsa and Prabhat Patnik argue that the accumulation of capital has always required the taking of land, raw materials, and bodies from non-capitalism modes of production. So that is something I'm also interested in, because I actually watched an interview with Prabhat, not Utsa, Prabhat, talking to Rana Kalik on, I think it was Breakthrough News, or was it her dispatches? I think it was Breakthrough News. And I was very interested in what he had to say. I did read The Origin of Totalitarianism by Hannah Arendt, and I think she goes off this idea, which I think comes from Lenin. I don't know, don't quote me, but it's like this idea that imperialism comes out of capitalism. But I remember in the interview with he was in, he talks about how they work side by side. Like, capitalism cannot exist without imperialism, which is what he means, the taking of land, raw materials, and bodies. So that was interesting to me. I suspect this will be very hard. Anytime I get into very Marxist, capitalist kind of economic books, I'm in for a challenge. I'm not an economics major. I'm just a little business major. So this will be a challenge, but I'm excited to read it and learn more. I like to expand my understanding of imperialism and capitalism. Oh, so that is it. That is everything I bought in December. As you can see, it's literally all nonfiction, because nonfiction has been my energy for 2024. I just love learning, and I want to learn more and more. So hopefully that'll be 2025, where I read more, understand more, learn more. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say. This is a birthday gift to myself. Okay, no judgment. Yeah, I just want to say free Palestine, free Sudan, free Congo, free anyone who's colonized. Buy local, shop local. Don't shop at like Barnes and Noble or Amazon or Target. Try to shop local at local bookstores. Try to support independent publishers. Try to challenge yourself as a reader. Expand your knowledge, expand your horizon. If you are interested in something and want to learn more about it, you can read about it. Yeah, all this, like, I just want to say, like, I'm completely, not completely, I obviously went to university. I kind of just did my own little university kind of by learning and reading all these books and teaching myself. And these books have really, not all specifically nonfiction, has really shaped my views and changed me and challenged my views. And I really think that it's very important to open your, mind and challenge yourself and read, and learn, constantly learn. If you don't know what's going on, read about it. Yeah. I don't know why this turned into a little diatribe. That's my birthday book haul. That's my December book haul. Don't judge me. But yeah, see you later.